Welcome to the Unraveling the Scriptures channel. Perhaps one of the most recognizable stories from the Bible is the narrative of Samson, the life journey of the strongest man in sacred scriptures. However, I ask you, do you truly know the origin of Samson and the extent of his strength? Was he merely strong, with skin truly as tough as stone, and more agile than foxes? After all, people do not have a complete understanding of Samson's biography. In this video, I will address all these aspects, exploring whether Samson faced giants in his time, especially considering the presence of giants in the cities of the Philistines. This and much more will be discussed in this video, focusing on the origin of Samson, his story, and trivia. So, please leave your likes, comments, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with those interested in discovering more about Samson. The mystery of the origin of Samson, the strongest man in the Bible. Samson, in ancient Phoenician Hebrew, is pronounced as Shimshon and means, man of the sun, son, or even, little son. In ancient Aramaic, it would also mean, son, and be pronounced as Shimsha or even Semez, with the basic root Semez, which in both Aramaic and Phoenician Hebrew literally means, son. Samson was the last of the judges of the ancient Israelites, as mentioned in the book of Judges, chapters 13 to 16. He belonged to the tribe of Dan and was one of the last leaders to judge Israel before the establishment of the monarchy among the Hebrew people. In some Israelite versions, Samson is considered a hero of the Middle East, often compared to other heroes from different mythologies, such as the famous giant Gilgamesh, Enkidu, and the Greek Hercules himself. The biblical account tells us that Samson was a Nazirite and received immense strength to aid him against his enemies, allowing him to perform superhuman feats, equated to the strength of God, as the Spirit of God entered him. For those unfamiliar, a Nazirite is someone who abstains from certain practices, such as letting the hair grow and avoiding the consumption of wine, among other things, as a way to please God through a vow. One of Samson's notable feats was killing a lion with his bare hands, tearing it in half. Additionally, he managed to defeat an entire army of about 1,000 Philistine men using only the jawbone of a donkey. However, if his long hair were to be cut, his Nazirite vow would be violated, resulting in the loss of his extraordinary strength. The biblical narrative recounts that Samson was betrayed by his lover, Delilah, sent by the Philistine officials to seduce him. Delilah ordered a servant to cut his hair while he slept and handed him over to the Philistine enemies, who gouged out his eyes and forced him to grind grain in a mill in the region of Gaza. During this period, Samson's hair began to grow again. When the Philistines took Samson to the temple of Dagon, he asked to rest against one of the supporting pillars. After receiving permission, Samson prayed to God and miraculously regained his strength, allowing him to tear down the columns, destroy the temple, and sacrifice himself, killing himself and all the Philistines. In some Jewish traditions, Samson is believed to have been buried in Zorah, Israel, overlooking the valley of Sorek, also considered his birthplace. Samson has been the subject of analysis and commentary over time by rabbinic, Islamic, and Christian scholars. Some Christians see him as a type of Messiah for the people, while others consider him simply a man of God who made mistakes in his life. There is an ancient recorded Jewish legend that states that Samson's shoulders were about 60 cubits wide. However, many Talmudic commentators explain that this should not be taken literally, as a person of this size could not live normally in a society. Instead, the exaggerated narrative suggests that Samson had unusually broad shoulders, probably being a man of great stature compared to other Israelites. In this Jewish legend, it is also mentioned that his braids produced an audible sound when they collided, at a considerable distance. This peculiar detail suggests that the sound could be heard as Samson moved, due to the swaying and contact of the braids. According to this Jewish legend, it was claimed that Samson was incredibly strong, to the point of being able to lift 2 mountains and rub them together as if they were clumps of soil. Additionally, in the Bible, Samson is notorious for avoiding women from his own people, the people of Israel. He did not choose any woman from the tribe of Dan to be his wife but showed great interest and preference for foreign women, especially those of Philistine origin. Interestingly, his first wife was a true Philistine, and her father was also a Philistine man. Despite his appreciation for Philistine women, Samson found himself in many conflicts with the Philistines in general. He seemed to have a preference for Philistine women, but at the same time, his relationships with them resulted in many problems with the Philistines themselves. It is worth noting that the Philistines were natural enemies of the people of Israel. Samson did not harbor a specific antipathy towards the Philistines themselves, except when it came to Philistine women, which led to various complicated situations throughout his story. Even Delilah herself is associated with some theories based on Jewish interpretations that claim Samson was naturally a man of immense strength, regardless of whether the Spirit of God manifested in his body. These theories and views often suggest that Samson was practically a giant in size, height, and strength, although the Bible does not explicitly state anything about this aspect, remaining more of a speculation. Based on the Bible and the feats of Samson when the Spirit of God was not manifest in him, it is evident that Samson was indeed naturally very strong. Undoubtedly, he stood out among other Israelites, Philistines, and Canaanites who inhabited the region of Israel in antiquity. It is possible that Samson was about 5 feet 11 inches or even 6 feet 3 inches tall, being a muscular man, which significantly set him apart from other Israelite men of the time, who mostly had a maximum height of 5 feet 7 inches. Samson's errors, most of the time, were related to the women he chose to get involved with. Instead of seeking relationships with women who shared his faith in his own God and who were from his own people, according to the traditions he followed and taught as a judge, Samson got involved with women of Philistine origin. He married his first wife, who was Philistine, and from that point on, he began to engage in actions that violated the Mosaic law he followed. For example, Samson ate honey from a dead lion, finding it in a hive inside the carcass of the animal he had killed himself. For the Jews, this practice was considered unclean. Now, answering the burning question, what was Samson's maximum strength? What was the highest level of strength he possessed? First, I will address some feats of Samson and make some observations that, unfortunately, many overlook regarding the history and trajectory of this character. Here, I will present about 10 accounts of Samson's remarkable strength, starting with him facing and tearing a lion in half with his own hands, as described in Judges 14, verses 5 to 9. The second impressive feat of Samson was when he killed about 30 Philistines after his wife revealed the riddle to them, as recorded in Judges, chapter 14, verse 19. The third feat, often forgotten, occurred after the father of the wife handed Samson over. He tied 3 foxes, set them on fire, and burned the vineyards and olive groves of the Philistines, as described in Judges 15 verse 4, verse 6. Let's consider this part involving the 300 foxes, and through it, we can recognize another aspect of Samson's power, which was his remarkable speed. In addition to his extraordinary strength, Samson also demonstrated great swiftness. A fox, for example, reaches about 42 miles per hour, and Samson managed to capture 300 of them. Imagine the effort required to chase and capture each one, especially considering that each one runs between 42 and 45 miles per hour. This not only highlights Samson's strength but also his endurance and incredible speed to catch them. He showed remarkable stamina to capture all the foxes, indicating that he was considerably faster than them. Regarding Samson's previous feat of killing a lion, it is important to highlight that the biting force of a lion and its total strength vary, depending on the lion, reaching around 313 to 320 kilograms. Samson, by tearing the lion in half, demonstrated a considerably greater strength, surpassing 400 kilograms, based solely on this aspect. The fourth feat of Samson indicates that, driven by anger over the death of his Philistine wife and father-in-law, he sought revenge by killing a considerable number of Philistines. The fifth remarkable feat of Samson occurred when the men of Judah, overwhelmed by fear of the Philistines, handed Samson over to them. However, Samson managed to free himself from his bonds, breaking the ropes that bound him as if they were strands of hair. At that moment, he confronted and defeated about 1,000 Philistine soldiers armed with swords, shields, spears, and armor. The surprising detail is that Samson achieved this victory using only the jawbone of a donkey. The sixth extraordinary feat of Samson was when he knocked down and carried the enormous gate of the city of Gaza to a hill near Hebron. In the seventh feat, he broke his bonds after Delilah thought she had discovered his weakness, as described in Judges 16 verse 9. The eighth notable feat of Samson involved breaking the new ropes with which they attempted to bind him in another attempt by Delilah to betray him for money. The 10th feat, perhaps the most incredible of his life, occurred after the Philistines captured Samson, gouged out his eyes, and imprisoned him. Samson cried out to the Lord and, in an act of sacrifice, brought down the pillars of the Philistine temple, causing it to collapse on those inside, resulting in the death of approximately 3,000 Philistines. It is noteworthy to point out that ancient temples dedicated to deities like Dagon had extremely heavy pillars, weighing many tons. Samson, in performing this extraordinary feat, demonstrated his supernatural strength, capable of manipulating extremely heavy loads. Addressing a possible question about Samson's ability to face giants in his time, although the Bible does not mention it, it is suggested that the giants in the Philistine cities, aware of Samson's fame, likely avoided confronting him. Thus, Samson not only defeated 1,000 men alone, but his reputation also made giants fear facing him. Thank you to everyone who watched the video so far. Please share your thoughts on the video covering the story of Samson and also provide suggestions for other characters from the scriptures. Stay with God, see you soon.